Hi friends, today you're going to start your very first earth science investigation. This investigation is called Soil Composition Part 1. Today we're going to begin a study of earth materials and how the shape of the earth changes over time. Earth materials are the various solids, liquids, and gases that make up earth. The earth materials we're going to look at today are in the soils that are in each individual baggie. However, before we begin the investigation, we need to talk about first, what is soil? Have you ever dug a hole in the ground? What did you remove to make the hole? Soil. Sometimes people call it dirt, but a scientist calls the layer of diggable material that covers planet Earth soil. What is soil? If you pick up a handful of soil and look at it closely, you might be able to see and feel what soil is made of. Soil is mostly made of several sizes of rock. You might see pebbles and smaller pieces of gravel. Soil usually contains sand. Particles of sand are really tiny rocks. Some pieces of rock are even smaller than grains of sand. Smaller pieces are called silt. The smallest pieces of rock are clay particles. Clay particles are too small to see, but you can feel them. Clay feels slippery when it is wet. So soil is a mixture of different sized rocks, pebbles, gravel, particles of sand, and even smaller particles of silt and clay, along with water and air. Rocks, air, and water are earth materials, but there is more to soil than earth materials. Soil is mostly made of rock in several sizes, along with water and air. If you look to the right, there's a rock size chart that really gives you an in-depth understanding of how big each rock size is that comprise soil. Soil also contains organic material. Organic material is the remains of dead plants and animals. Plants send their roots into the soil and animals dig into the soil. When plants and animals die, their remains become part of the soil. Plants and animals decay into tiny pieces called humus. Humus provides nutrients for plants. Humus also helps the soil retain water. Retain means to keep or to hold. What is an animal that lives in soil? Worms. Worms are good for soil and help plants grow. Worms burrow through the soil. As they move, worms mix the soil and make passageways for air and water. Worm waste also adds nutrients that are good for soil and plants. A worm in soil enriched with humus. Not all soils are alike. Some kinds of soil have more humus. Some soils have more clay. Some have more sand, pebbles, and gravel. Digging into soils. What differences do you see in the soils shown above? Where do you think these soils are found? Now here's what's important for today's investigation. You are going to be looking at 4 different types of soils. You're going to be analyzing the soil for different properties. Properties that you should be looking for are the color, the shape of the materials, particle size, and texture, or what it feels like. On to the fun part. Here's where you actually get to perform the investigation. So, at your last parent pickup, you should have picked up your science bag that looks just like this. Pause the video to get this out right now. Please watch the video to help get you started. Once the video is over, please go to the next slide. In order to prepare for the next part of the experiment and to record your findings, you need to get out your Earth Science, Earth Changes in Human Impact journal that should have been picked up with your science materials at our last parent pickup. Here are the materials that you're going to need. You're going to need the paper plates, and you should have 4 of them. You should have a magnifying glass, or a hand lens is what they call it. You should have a little baggie that says soil composition on it. And inside that baggie, you should see 4 baggies with 4 different types of soils. Now what you're going to do with a marker, I usually use a marker, but you could use anything, is you are going to write the numbers 1 on the first plate, 2 on the second plate, 3 on the third plate, and 4 on the fourth plate. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take the corresponding baggies and you're going to very carefully pour them onto the paper plates. So this baggie says number 4. So I'm going to very carefully pour it out onto the paper plate that says number 4. Number 3. Number 2. And finally, number 1. So what you should have are 4 plates, and each one should have its own soil on it. Now, here's your observation part. With your hand lens, you're going to look closely at each paper plate, and using your earth science notebook, you are going to take detailed descriptions in writing and by drawing what you see on each paper plate. On the next slide, you will see which paper I'm talking about. Watch the following video to see how to set up your experiment. This will be phase 1 of the part 1 experiment. Now that you have put your soil on the 4 different plates, you will take your hand lens, and using your hand lens, you're going to investigate each soil. In each of the boxes, after you've gone into investigations and seen the picture on the first page of investigations, you are going to make a detailed picture using a pencil of each individual soil. Again, scientists are very detailed. I want you to make sure that you are including the size of the particles you see in each soil. You're talking about the colors that you see, and also the texture. What does it feel like? Now, you're going to be recording these when they're on the paper. Later, this is going to be important because we're investigating dry soils for this part of the experiment. Now that you've recorded detailed observations on your soil page, now it's time to get ready for the next phase of the experiment. You will need 4 vials, empty vials, not the ones with vinegar in it, little Post-it notes, and here's what's really important. You are going to very carefully, one by one, take each plate of soil, and you're going to make it almost into a taco shape, like this. And very carefully, you're going to pour each soil into the vial. So please make sure that you are keeping track of which soil is in which vial. So now this was soil number 1. So I'm going to make sure to mark on a Post-it note number 1 and put that on the vial. Now I'm going to go over to the sink and I'm going to very carefully pour water into the vial. I'm not going to overflow it. I'm going to pour it until it's about this high full of water. In the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like with all 4 soils. So you're going to repeat the process for each soil, pouring it gently into the vial, labeling it with the number that was on the plate, and then filling each vial up to about here with water. This video has no sound, but what I'm doing is I'm making sure that all the vials are filled with water, not too high, and I'm just popping the cap gently back onto each vial and making sure that the cap is securely on each vial. Then I'm going to shake each vial up and let them sit overnight. The next part of the experiment will have to be done the next day, as each vial has to sit and settle overnight.